Klebsiella pneumoniae are gram-negative rod-shaped bacteria. In this mnemonic video, we'll cover all the characteristics and functions of Klebsiella pneumoniae so you'll be able to answer any questions on test day. We're out here at the country club for a day at the golf course. See all the clubs in that golf bag? The clubs here should help you remember Klebsiella. Get it? Clubs for Klebsiella. You might even call it clubsiella. Let's start our conversation, as always, with the visual characteristics of these bacteria. Check out those red sausage links sitting on the table. The country club must be serving a hot breakfast for the golf players before they play. By the way, the red color of the sausage links should remind you of gram-negative bacteria, since gram-negative bacteria stain red under the microscope. And the long rod shape of the sausage links here should remind you of rod-shaped bacteria. So, together, red sausage links for gram-negative and rod-shaped bacteria. Klebsiella pneumoniae appears as a gram-negative and rod-shaped bacteria under the microscope. With the visual characteristics out of the way, let's move on to some other identifying characteristics for this bacteria. Going along with the idea of breakfast here, the country club has put out a jug of milk. By the way, the milk here should help you remember that Klebsiella is lactose fermenting, since milk has lactose. Get it? Milk for lactose fermenting? Klebsiella pneumoniae are lactose fermenting bacteria. In the laboratory, exposure to lactose to detect if the bacteria ferments lactose is the next step in bacterial identification after the gram stain. Let's continue looking around the scene to find out yet another laboratory characteristic of Klebsiella pneumoniae that you should know. Check out the man outside on the golf course. Seems like he's had quite a bit to drink and decided to just let loose on the course. You know how people who golf outside always just pee on the course? Well, the urine here should help you remember urease. Get it? Urine for urease? Klebsiella pneumoniae are urease-positive bacteria, which just means that they possess an enzyme called urease that allows them to break down urea into ammonia. Basically, this allows the bacteria to survive in environments like our urine, but practically, the presence of urease is also used as an identifying characteristic to distinguish Klebsiella from other bacteria. So, if a gram-negative rod is both lactose-fermenting and urease-positive, you should have a high clinical suspicion for Klebsiella. Next, take a look at that glass dome or capsule covering the bread here. Yep, since you gotta keep the bread covered to keep it from drying out and becoming hard, right? Anyways, the capsule over the bread here should help you remember that Klebsiella is an encapsulated bacteria with a polysaccharide capsule. Get it? The glass capsule should remind you of encapsulation, while the bread here should remind you that this capsule is made of polysaccharides, or complex sugars. Since bread is a carb, really made up of complex sugars, right? Now, the next fact is low yield, but Klebsiella is usually transmitted by person-to-person contact. This classically occurs in healthcare facilities through the transmission of fomites, or little bacterial particles between people. Again, the transmission route of Klebsiella is pretty low yield, and is usually ignored by most other resources, but I think it helps contextualize the infection. Let's move on to what a clinical infection with Klebsiella actually looks like. Looks like one of our patrons here choked on her breakfast and is now coughing it up. By the way, the woman choking and coughing on her food should help you remember aspiration pneumonia. Get it? Since aspiration refers to food or other things going down the wrong pipe into our lungs, which leads to a lung infection, otherwise known as pneumonia. One of the ways that Klebsiella pneumoniae classically presents is as aspiration pneumonia. Typically, the pneumonia is lobar in distribution, meaning that it usually only affects one lobe of the lung, especially the right lower lobe. This also classically affects immunocompromised individuals, such as the elderly, alcoholics, and diabetics, although healthy individuals can also be infected in this way. There's actually a specific finding in this pneumonia that is high yield. Let's touch on this next. So, just what was it that went down the wrong pipe? Let's check out the contents of the plate in front of our patron. Looks like she was having bread with some red currant jelly. By the way, the dark red currant jam should help you remember the dark red currant jelly sputum that is often coughed up by patients with Klebsiella pneumonia. This dark red color comes from a mixture of blood, sputum, and mucus that is coughed up. The sputum tends to form mucoid colonies due to the abundance of the polysaccharide capsules from the bacteria in the sputum. Let's go back to the guy outside, who happens to be urinating. By the way, the urination here should also help you remember another classic presentation of Klebsiella, urinary tract infections, or UTIs. Get it? Urination for urinary tract infections? Klebsiella pneumoniae can cause UTIs, particularly in healthcare settings in patients with indwelling catheters. Klebsiella is particularly good at surviving in the urine, in part due to its urease positivity, since urease allows the bacteria to break down the urea in urine, producing ammonia that produces a more alkaline and friendly environment for the bacteria to live in. Specifically, the alkalinization of the urine leads to other issues in the urinary tract. Let's touch on these next. Like any person letting loose outside, this guy has decided to do his business behind this big rock. By the way, the peeing on the rock or stone here should help you remember kidney stones. Get it? Since kidney stones are big rocks or stones in the urinary tract? A UTI infection caused by Klebsiella pneumoniae can lead to production of kidney stones, particularly one type of kidney stone called struvite stones. The struvite stones developed because the urease from Klebsiella pneumoniae alkalinizes in the urine, which reduces the solubility of struvite in the urine. The precipitation of struvite crystals then leads to stone formation. Let's end by covering some common treatment options. Like any country club, this one comes complete with some rustic decor. And nothing screams rustic like axes mounted onto the wall. The 3 axes mounted on this wall should remind you of ceftriaxone, a third-generation cephalosporin antibiotic used to treat Klebsiella infections. Get it? Since triax kind of reminds me of ceftriaxone? Note that these treatment options are constantly changing because Klebsiella pneumoniae has had a rapid evolution of drug resistance. So in real life, the treatment for a Klebsiella pneumoniae infection is mostly dependent on specific antibiotic susceptibility. All right, that's it for Klebsiella pneumoniae. Let's summarize. Klebsiella pneumoniae are gram-negative and rod-shaped bacteria. Klebsiella pneumoniae are also lactose-fermenting and urease-positive bacteria. One of the main clinical presentations of a Klebsiella pneumoniae infection is aspiration pneumonia. The pneumonia is associated with dark red currant jelly sputum that forms mucoid colonies because of abundant polysaccharide capsules. Another clinical presentation for a Klebsiella pneumoniae infection are UTIs. The Klebsiella pneumoniae can lead to the formation of struvite stones when patients have a UTI. Finally, the main treatment option for Klebsiella pneumoniae infection are third-generation cephalosporins like ceftriaxone. Okay, now we're actually done. More golfers are coming in for breakfast, so let's give them some space. I'll see you in the next one.